Eli Lilly committed $2.75 billion to AI-discovered drug molecules, and a robot doubled solar construction speed in the California desert, and a team in Stockholm used an X-ray laser to watch water do something that nobody had ever directly seen it do before. That's today. Let's get into it. Okay, so Eli Lilly just wrote a check, $115 million up front, with up to $2.75 billion in milestones and royalties to a Hong Kong-based company called Insilico Medicine. Here's what they're buying: 28 drug compounds generated by AI, and nearly half of them already in clinical stages. Now feel the weight of that number, because chances are you may not relatively understand what it really means. 28 clinical stage or near clinical stage molecules. Now, a traditional pharmaceutical company might spend decades assembling a pipeline that dense. Insilico did it with generative AI, the same underlying technology we talk about all the time, but pointed at molecular design. The AI proposes candidate molecules. Researchers test them. The ones that survive move forward, and the whole loop now runs faster than any human-only team could manage. Now, Lilly isn't a startup making a bet. This is a company with a $900 billion market cap and one of the most sophisticated drug development operations on Earth. Their group VP of molecule discovery called Insilico's AI a powerful complement to what Lilly already does. And that's a $900 billion company saying that. And Insilico's founder, Alex Zavaronkov, said something really revealing. He said that Lilly is better than us in some areas of AI. So these are two organizations, and they're not in a buyer-seller relationship, but rather they're kind of merging capabilities that neither one has by themselves. Lilly is bringing the clinical machinery, so the trials, the regulatory expertise, and the manufacturing, while Insilico is bringing the discovery engine, the part that used to take the longest and cost the most. What you're watching is the most expensive phase of pharmaceutical development, which is finding that molecule, compressing from decades to years. And for anyone waiting on a treatment for anything, that compression is measured in life. Now, that didn't come out of nowhere. The Century Report covered Sanofi committing roughly $4.5 billion across 3 different AI drug deals back on March 23rd. MindRank reached phase 3 in just 4.5 years from project start for an AI-designed oral GLP-1 drug documented back on February 26. What's different about the Lilly deal, though, is the scale and the signal. When the biggest players stop treating AI-discovered molecules as experiments and start really pricing them as production inputs in the billions, that's the market telling you the transition has already happened. The question isn't whether an AI drug discovery works, but how fast the pipeline flows. And there's a geopolitical layer worth noting too. Insilico develops its AI outside China, in Canada and the Middle East, while conducting early preclinical work inside China. Now, that's not an accident. That is the architecture of a company navigating 2 gravitational fields at once, where the talent is and where the geopolitical constraints allow the work to happen. So the global map of AI-enabled science is being drawn in real time, and it doesn't really follow borders that anyone expected. Okay, let's shift away here. I want to take you to a solar field in Southern California and a lithium plant in Texas, because California and Texas typically belong in the same sentence, right? Because these 2 stories are actually one story, but they're wearing 2 different outfits. At the AES Bellefield complex, that's a site that will eventually exceed a gigawatt of total capacity, a Maximo construction robot hit 100 megawatts of installed solar. The version 3.0 machines are constantly surpassing 1 module per minute. Crews working alongside the robots nearly doubled the installation rate of traditional methods at comparable sites. So Chris Shelton, Maximo's president, said it really plainly. Field robotics has moved beyond experimentation and is delivering consistent results at utility scale. Meanwhile, in Hooks, Texas, near Texarkana, EnergyX just commissioned the largest direct lithium extraction plant in the entire U.S., Project Lonestar. It's pulling lithium from local Smackover brine and producing 250 metric tons per year of battery-grade lithium carbonate equivalent. CEO Teague Egan says they're the lowest cost domestic producer. Now, here's why these 2 things belong together. Again, Texas and California together. The clean energy transition has 2 constraints that keep coming up like a recurring headache. 1, we can't build solar fast enough because there aren't enough construction workers. But 2, We can't build batteries independently because China controls 70 to 75% of global lithium chemical conversion. Yesterday, both of those constraints got weaker. The robot doesn't replace workers, it transforms what workers do. A human crew of the same size, working alongside a robot, produces nearly twice the output. This isn't displacement, it's leverage. And the lithium plant doesn't solve the entire supply chain overnight. 250 tons is modest against global demand, but it proves the economics work. Once you prove the economics, capital flows. And once capital flows, the next plant is bigger and bigger after that. The Century Report documented U.S. grid battery manufacturing reaching domestic self-sufficiency for the first time back on March 23rd. And just 9 days earlier, Terabase Energy began commercial shipments of its autonomous robotic solar construction system rated at over a gigawatt per factory year. What's accumulating here isn't just a series of announcements, but a supply chain assembling itself in real time. Domestic lithium, domestic batteries, robotic installation. Each piece makes the next one more viable. Each one loosens a constraint that was binding the whole system. And the U.S. added 43 gigawatts of solar last year at current construction speeds and current supply chain dependencies. Now, what happens when both of those change? All right, let's shift away again. I want to talk about water, not metaphorically, but actual water, the stuff in your glass, in your water bottle right now. Water is the most studied substance on Earth by a large margin. We've been poking at it since before modern chemistry really even existed. And yesterday, a team at Stockholm University proved that we have been missing something fundamental about it that entire time. Something that was theorized for over a century but never directly seen. At approximately negative 63 degrees Celsius and 1,000 atmospheres of pressure, water does something extraordinary. It doesn't freeze. Instead, it exists briefly as two distinct liquids simultaneously, a high-density form and a low-density form. And at this critical point, they merge into one. Now, the existence of this second critical point has been debated since the 1990s and speculated about since Röntgen's era, but nobody could see it because the state lasts for fractions of a second before the water actually crystallizes into ice. It vanishes before you can really catch it. The Stockholm team caught it. They used ultrafast X-ray laser pulses at the PAL XFEL facility in South Korea. Flashes fast enough to photograph the phenomenon before it disappeared. A researcher, Robin Jaberski, described the dynamics near the critical point as resembling a black hole. It looks like you cannot escape the critical point if you entered it, is what she said. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool physics and all, but what does this have to do with me? Fair, okay, but here's what. This critical point, even though it exists at extreme conditions, influences how water behaves at the temperatures and pressures where you and I actually do live. It's part of why water has its anomalous properties, why ice floats, for example, why water expands when it cools below 4 degrees, why it's such an extraordinary solvent. These are the properties that make life possible. Vaivos Parakis, associate professor at Stockholm, he put it this way: I find it very exciting that water is the only supercritical liquid at ambient conditions where life exists, and we also know there is no life without water. Is this pure coincidence? That's his quote. This isn't just philosophically accessible anymore. It's always been that, but experimentally, meaning someone can now design a study to investigate the connection between water's deep thermodynamic structure and the conditions that allow biology to even exist. That investigation wasn't possible before yesterday's result because the phenomenon it depends on had never been directly confirmed. And this sits inside a pattern that the Century Report has been tracking. MIT's terahertz microscope crossing the diffraction limit back on March 18th to directly observe superconducting electron behavior for the first time. In each case, a new instrument makes visible something that theory predicted but nobody could confirm. And each time that happens, entire fields of investigation open up that simply didn't exist as experimental possibilities before. The instruments aren't just measuring the world more precisely, they are expanding what counts as measurable. That's a different thing, and it's awesome. All right, let's shift away again. Michigan City, Indiana, in a simple neighborhood. A former federal mogul industrial facility, and a suspected Google data center that residents are now fighting to halt. Soil samples from the Project Maze site show that contamination levels are exceeding state safety criteria for both arsenic and TCE, which is a known carcinogen. Ashley Williams, the executive director of Just Transition Northwest Indiana, sent a letter on behalf of multiple organizations, including the NAACP Michigan City branch, demanding construction stop until all moved soil is fully characterized and contamination properly managed. The Indiana Department of Environmental Management approved an air permit for the site on March 19th, and that permit allows 66 diesel-fired emergency generators with no emission control devices. At a December public hearing, more than 30 speakers raised concerns about that. And here's the part that I really thought was interesting. Residents allege that city officials are refusing to let the public view data center site plans. And this is citing an Indiana statute that allows municipalities to deny access under public safety threats. So citing public safety as the reason to prevent the public from seeing what's being built in their neighborhood. So this extends a pattern Century Report has tracked for months now. The Monterey Park petition, the Saline Township controversy, the New Brunswick Park replacement, the Kentucky farmers who wouldn't sell at any price. A few days ago, on March 27th, this publication documented how local opposition is materially slowing data center construction across multiple communities. What Michigan City adds is contamination, environmental justice layered on top of the noise, emissions, and water concerns that have been the standard objections. And here's what I think really matters most about this. The intelligence era requires physical infrastructure, massive amounts of it, at least for now. The infrastructure has to go somewhere, and the communities absorbing the consequences, such as the diesel generators, the contaminated soil, the water draw, are increasingly organized, increasingly legally sophisticated, and unwilling to accept that their consent is optional. The question isn't whether data centers will get built. The question is now whether the process of building them creates allies or adversaries in the community where they land. What's happening in Michigan City? Non-disclosure agreements before public discussion, permits approved despite documented contamination, site plans hidden behind legal citations. That's the adversary-making version of this, the version that turns every future project harder to build. The companies and municipalities figuring this out, the ones that show up with transparency and genuine community benefit, are going to build faster than the ones that don't. I'm not making an ethical argument here. I feel like that's a practical one. Here's what I'd like you to hold on to today. Eli Lilly just priced 28 AI-discovered molecules in the billions, not as curiosity, but as production inputs. Robots are doubling the speed of solar construction while domestic lithium extraction starts loosening a supply chain that ran through a single country. Stockholm confirmed something about water, the most familiar substance on Earth that we've theorized about for 100 years, but never directly witnessed. Michigan City is teaching us that the physical infrastructure of the intelligence era will be built with community consent, or it will be fought at every site. That's the threshold. Now, very soon, watch for the next major pharma company to structure a deal around AI-native drug discovery. That Lilly deal won't be the last, even this quarter. Watch for robotic solar installations to appear in workforce projections for the first time. When labor economists start modeling it, you'll know the transition is real. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow.